The fluorescent lights hummed quietly in the emergency room corridor as Sarah Martinez adjusted her stethoscope around her neck. It was 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in downtown Chicago, and the night had been surprisingly calm for a trauma center that usually saw its fair share of violence. She had no idea that in less than 3 minutes, every skill she had learned during her 8 years as an Army Ranger would be put to the ultimate test. The automatic doors burst open with a violent crash, and a man in a black hoodie stumbled through, blood seeping through his fingers as he clutched his abdomen. But it wasn't the wounded man that made Sarah's training kick in immediately. It was the glint of metal in his other hand, and the wild, desperate look in his eyes as he raised a .38 caliber revolver toward the reception desk. "Nobody move," he screamed, his voice echoing off the stair walls. "I need help, and I need it now, or people are going to die." What he didn't know was that the petite woman in scrubs, standing just 20 feet away, had spent 3 tours in Afghanistan, had survived IED explosions, firefights, and rescue missions that most people only see in movies. What he couldn't possibly understand was that Nurse Sarah Martinez was about to become his worst nightmare, and, paradoxically, his only hope for survival. This is the true story of a night that changed everything. A story of survival, split-second decisions, and the thin line between life and death that exists in the space between a finger and a trigger. Sarah Martinez had always believed that her military days were behind her. After 8 grueling years as an Army Ranger, including 3 deployments to Afghanistan and countless classified operations, she had traded her combat boots for nursing shoes and her rifle for a stethoscope. The transition hadn't been easy. The hypervigilance that had kept her alive in war zones now seemed excessive in the quiet halls of Chicago Memorial Hospital. But tonight, those instincts would prove to be exactly what she needed. The emergency room at Chicago Memorial was a place where life and death decisions happened every minute. Sarah had been working the night shift for 2 years now, finding comfort in the predictable chaos of medical emergencies. It was different from the chaos of war, more manageable somehow. She could save lives here without having to take them, could heal instead of harm. The irony wasn't lost on her that she felt more at peace surrounded by the wounded than she ever had in civilian life outside the hospital. Dr. James Wilson, the attending physician, had noticed Sarah's unusual calm during crisis situations. While other nurses might panic when a trauma case rolled through the doors, Sarah seemed to enter a focused state that reminded him of documentaries he'd seen about elite military units. She never spoke about her past, but there were signs for those who knew how to look. The way she assessed a room when she entered it, always noting exits and potential threats. The precise, economical way she moved during emergencies. The fact that she never seemed surprised by violence, no matter how brutal or unexpected. On this particular Tuesday night, the ER had been unusually quiet. Sarah had just finished checking on Mrs. Chun, an elderly woman recovering from a minor heart episode, when she heard the commotion at the main entrance. The automatic doors had burst open with such force that they bounced off their stops, creating a metallic crash that echoed through the waiting area. Sarah's head snapped up immediately, her military training automatically cataloging the situation before her conscious mind had even processed what was happening. The man who stumbled through the doors was in his early 30s, Hispanic, wearing dark jeans and a black hoodie that was soaked with blood around the midsection. His face was pale with blood loss, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool night air. But what immediately caught Sarah's attention wasn't his obvious need for medical attention. It was the way his right hand gripped a snub-nosed revolver, and the wild desperation in his eyes as he scanned the room like a cornered animal. "Nobody fucking move," he shouted, his voice cracking with pain and adrenaline. "I need help, and I need it now. Anyone tries to be a hero, people die." The waiting room had only a handful of people at this hour. An elderly man with a walker sat near the window, reading a newspaper. A young mother held her feverish toddler, rocking gently in one of the plastic chairs. The night security guard, a heavy-set man named Bob who was nearing retirement, had been dozing at his desk, and was now fumbling for his radio with trembling hands. At the reception desk, Maria Santos, a nurse with 15 years of experience, froze with her hand halfway to the panic button. Sarah felt the familiar sensation of time slowing down, the same phenomenon she'd experienced countless times in combat zones. Her breathing automatically regulated itself, and she began what her ranger instructors had called tactical breathing. For counts in, hold for 4 for counts out. Her mind began rapidly processing the tactical situation, just as she had been trained to do when encountering enemy combatants. The gunman was approximately 25 feet from her position. He was wounded, which meant his reaction time would be compromised, but it also made him exponentially more dangerous because wounded animals were unpredictable. The blood loss suggested an abdominal wound, possibly from a knife or gunshot. Based on the amount of blood and his increasingly pale complexion, he had maybe 10 to 15 minutes before he would lose consciousness for blood loss. This was both an opportunity and a complication. His weapon was a .38 caliber revolver. She could tell from the cylinder and barrel length. 6 shots maximum, unless he had reloaded, which seemed unlikely given his condition. His grip on the weapon was firm, but his hands were beginning to shake, either from blood loss, adrenaline, or both. He was right-handed, and the way he held the gun suggested he had some familiarity with firearms, but wasn't professionally trained. A professional would have entered with the weapon already targeted on the greatest threat, the security guard, rather than waving it around the room. Sarah's position gave her several advantages. She was partially concealed behind a mobile medical cart, which would provide minimal cover, but would obscure her movements if she needed to act. She was also closest to the supply closet, where she knew there were potential improvised weapons, though she hoped it wouldn't come to that. Most importantly, she was behind and to the side of the gunman's field of vision. If she needed to move, she had a clear path that would keep her in his blind spot for at least the first few seconds. "Listen to me," the gunman continued, his voice getting weaker, but more desperate. "I don't want to hurt nobody, but I will if you make me. I got shot, okay? Some guys jumped me, and I need help. But I ain't going to prison, you understand? So nobody calls the cops, nobody does nothing stupid, and we all go home tonight." Sarah could see Dr. Wilson emerging from examination room 3, his face going white as he took in the scene. She caught his eye and gave him an almost imperceptible shake of the head. In military operations, one of the first rules was that untrained personnel should never try to be heroes. Civilians had good intentions, but lacked the training to handle armed confrontations, and their involvement almost always made situations worse. The gunman noticed Dr. Wilson and swung the weapon toward him. You're a doctor, right? Good. You gonna fix me up? And then I'm walking out of here. No questions, no paperwork, no nothing. Dr. Wilson raised his hand slowly, his voice calm and professional despite the circumstances. "Of course, we'll help you. That's what we're here for. But I need to put the gun down so I can examine you properly. You're losing blood, and every second counts. I ain't putting nothing down until I'm patched up and ready to leave," the gunman replied, though his voice was noticeably weaker than it had been just moments before. "And if any of you try anything, if anyone even looks at me wrong, I start shooting. I got nothing left to lose." Sarah knew this was the most dangerous type of situation. A cornered person with nothing to lose was unpredictable and therefore extremely hazardous. But she also recognized something in his voice that gave her hope. Despite his threats, despite the weapon, he didn't sound like someone who actually wanted to hurt innocent people. He sounded terrified and desperate, which meant there might be a way to resolve this without violence. The emergency room's protocol for this type of situation was clear. Lock down the area, call security and police, try to keep the threat contained until professional help arrived. But Sarah's military experience told her that waiting for backup might not be an option. The gunman was bleeding out, which meant his desperation would only increase as his condition deteriorated. Desperate people made increasingly poor decisions, and poor decisions in an armed situation meant innocent people died. She began to formulate a plan, running through various scenarios in her mind the way she had been trained to do. The primary objective was to neutralize the threat without casualties among the civilians. The secondary objective was to preserve the life of the gunman himself, if possible. The tertiary objective was to minimize trauma to the bystanders, particularly the young mother and her child. Sarah slowly reached for her phone, not to call for help, but to activate the voice recording app. Whatever happened next, she wanted there to be a record of events. In her military experience, situations like this could escalate quickly, and having documentation of what actually occurred could be crucial later. She also sent a quick text to the head of hospital security with their code for armed situation in progress. A simple message that would alert security without triggering an immediate response that might escalate the situation. The gunman had noticed the young mother and her child, and Sarah saw something flicker across his face. It might have been regret, or perhaps recognition of his own humanity reflected in theirs. This was good. It meant he wasn't completely consumed by desperation yet. There was still a part of him that understood the difference between right and wrong, which meant he could potentially be reasoned with. "What's your name?" Sarah called out softly, her voice carrying the calm authority that had served her well in military operations. The gunman's head snapped toward her, his eyes wild but focusing on her for the first time. "What?" "Your name," she repeated, stepping slightly into his line of sight, but keeping her hands visible and non-threatening. "You want help, right?" "Well, I'm a nurse, and I can help you. But I'd like to know what to call you." For a moment, the gunman seemed confused by the question. In his pain and desperation, he probably hadn't expected anyone to treat him like a human being rather than just a threat to be contained. "Marcus," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "My name is Marcus." "Okay, Marcus," Sarah said, taking another small step closer. "I am Sada. I can see you're hurt pretty badly, and I know you're scared. But I'm going to help you, okay? That's what we do here. We help people." What Marcus didn't know, what none of them knew except Dr. Wilson, who had glimpsed Sarah's personnel file, was that the woman speaking to him with such calm authority had once talked a suicide bomber out of detonating his vest in a crowded marketplace in Kandahar. She had learned that sometimes the most dangerous situations required the most human response, that treating people like human beings instead of threats was often the key to everyone walking away alive. Marcus's eyes darted between Sarah and Dr. Wilson, confusion evident on his increasingly pale face. The simple act of someone asking his name seemed to have momentarily cut through his desperation. Sarah recognized this as a crucial moment. In hostage situations, establishing personal connection was often the difference between violence and resolution. She had learned this lesson the hard way during a particularly tense standoff in Afghanistan, where a young Taliban fighter had been ready to detonate explosives in a school until Sarah's translator had gotten him talking about his sister. "Marcus, I can see you're in a lot of pain," Sarah continued, her voice maintaining that steady, calm tone that she had perfected during countless crisis situations. "How long ago were you hurt?" Maybe an hour," Marcus replied, his grip on the weapon loosening slightly as his body fought to stay conscious. "These guys, they cornered me in an alley. Said I owed money to someone I never heard of. When I told them they had the wrong guy, one of them stuck me with a knife." Sarah processed this information quickly. If the wound was an hour old and he was still mobile and coherent, it might not have hit any major organs. The blood loss was significant, but not immediately fatal. However, if there was internal bleeding, his condition could deteriorate rapidly. She also noted that his story suggested he wasn't a criminal trying to avoid arrest, but rather a victim of mistaken identity who was terrified of becoming involved with police. "That's awful, Marcus. Nobody deserves that," Sarah said, genuinely meaning it. "But you made the right choice coming here. We're going to take good care of you. Can you tell me where exactly you're hurt?" Dr. Wilson, understanding Sarah's approach, slowly moved closer while keeping his hands visible. "Marcus, I'm Dr. Wilson. Sarah's right. We want to help you. But to do that properly, I need to examine your wound. Would it be okay if I take a look?" Marcus swayed slightly on his feet, and for a moment Sarah thought he might collapse. The adrenaline that had gotten him this far was beginning to wear off, and blood loss was taking its toll. His hand trembling noticeably now, he pointed the gun vaguely in Dr. Wilson's direction. "Don't try nothing," he whispered. "I don't want to hurt nobody, but I can't go to prison. My little girl, she needs me. If I go to prison, there ain't nobody to take care of her." This revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. Marcus wasn't just some desperate criminal. He was a father trying to protect his ability to care for his child. The desperation in his voice when he mentioned his daughter was something Sarah recognized from her own childhood. She had grown up with a single father who had worked 3 jobs to keep them afloat. The fear of losing the ability to provide for your child was a primal terror that could drive otherwise good people to desperate acts. "How old is she?" Sarah asked softly. 6, Marcus replied, tears mixing with the sweat on his face. "She's 6 years old, and her mama ain't around no more. It's just me and her. If something happens to me—" "Nothing's going to happen to you," Sarah said firmly. "We're going to fix you up, and you're going to go home to your daughter. But, Marcus, I need you to understand something. Right now, you're bleeding, and every minute we stand here talking is a minute we're not stopping that bleeding. Dr. Wilson is the best trauma surgeon in the city. If you let him help you, you'll be okay." Sarah could see the internal struggle playing out on Marcus's face. He wanted to trust them, but fear and desperation were powerful forces. She needed to give him something concrete to hold on to, some reason to believe that cooperation wouldn't result in his worst fears coming true. "Marcus, look at me," Sarah said, stepping slightly closer. "I want you to know something about me. I've been in scary situations before, situations where I didn't know if I was going home to the people I cared about. And you know what I learned? Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is trust someone to help you." Dr. Wilson seized on Sarah's approach. "Marcus, here's what I can promise you. My job isn't to judge you or turn you in to anyone. My job is to save your life. Right now, that's all I care about. Can you let me do my job?" Marcus looked around the room, taking in the faces of the people he was holding at gunpoint. The elderly man with the walker had tears in his eyes, but was nodding encouragingly. The young mother was holding her child close, but wasn't showing fear, just concern. Even Bob, the security guard, had his hands raised, not in surrender, but in a gesture that seemed to say we're all on the same side here. "I don't know," Marcus whispered. "I don't know what to do." Sarah made a decision that went against every protocol she had ever been taught, both military and medical. She took 3 steps closer to Marcus, moving within arm's reach of the weapon. "Marcus, I want you to give me the gun," she said quietly. "Dr." Wilson's eyes went wide, and she could hear Bob the security guard suck in a sharp breath. What none of them understood was that Sarah wasn't making an impulsive decision. This was a calculated risk based on her assessment of Marcus's psychological state, his physical condition, and her own training in close-quarters combat. "I can't," Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Yes, you can," Sarah replied. "Because you're not a bad person, Marcus. Bad people don't worry about their 6-year-old daughters the way you're worrying about yours. Bad people don't come to hospitals for help. You came here because you knew we would help you, and that's exactly what we're going to do." Sarah extended her hand slowly, palm up, in a gesture that was both non-threatening and clearly requesting the weapon. "Your daughter needs her daddy healthy and safe. She doesn't need him bleeding to death in an emergency room because he was too scared to let people help him." The next few seconds felt like hours. Marcus stared at Sarah's outstretched hand, then at her face, then back at the hand. His own hand was shaking violently now, both from blood loss and from the emotional weight of the decision he was being asked to make. "If I give you this," he whispered, "how do I know you won't call the police? How do I know they won't arrest me?" "Because," Sarah said, "you haven't actually committed a crime, Marcus. You're a victim who came to a hospital for help. The only thing you've done wrong tonight is scare some people who want to help you. And scared people do stupid things sometimes. I understand that." Dr. Wilson stepped forward slightly. "Marcus, I've been working in emergency rooms for 15 years. You know how many gunshot victims I've treated who turn out to be victims themselves, not criminals? Hundreds. You know how many of them I've called the police on? Zero. Because that's not my job. My job is to heal people. Sarah could see the exact moment when Marcus made his decision. His shoulders sagged slightly, the fight going out of him as exhaustion and blood loss finally overcame adrenaline and desperation. Slowly, carefully, he placed the revolver in Sarah's outstretched palm. The moment the weapon left his hand, Marcus collapsed. Sarah caught him before he hit the floor, her military training automatically assessing his condition as she lowered him gently to the ground. His pulse was rapid and thready, his skin was cold and clammy, and his breathing was becoming shallow. He was going into hypovolemic shock from blood loss. "Dr. Wilson, we need to move now," Sarah called out, her voice switching from the gentle tone she had used with Marcus to the crisp efficiency of a medical professional in crisis mode. Dr. Wilson was already in motion, grabbing a gurney from the nearby bay. Maria at the reception desk was on the phone with the blood bank, and Bob the security guard was helping to clear a path to the trauma room. The carefully orchestrated chaos of emergency medicine kicked into high gear. As they lifted Marcus onto the gurney, Sarah noticed something that made her stomach clench. The blood on his shirt wasn't just from one wound. As Dr. Wilson cut away the fabric, they revealed two distinct puncture wounds in his abdomen, close together but angled differently. This wasn't just a single stab wound from a random mugging. Someone had deliberately tried to kill him. "Marcus," Sarah said urgently as they wheeled him toward the trauma room. "Marcus, can you hear me?" His eyes fluttered open, unfocused but aware. "My daughter," he whispered. "If something happens to me." "What's her name, Marcus? What's your daughter's name?" "Sophia," he replied, his voice barely audible now. "Sophia Martinez. She stays with Mrs. Rodriguez next door when I'm working. Tell her Daddy tried to come home." Dr. Wilson caught Sarah's eye over the gurney. They both understood what Marcus's condition meant. The wounds were worse than they had initially appeared, and his blood pressure was dropping rapidly. They might have minutes to save his life. As they burst through the doors of Trauma Room 1, Sarah found herself thinking about Sophia Martinez, age 6, probably asleep in her bed, unaware that her father was fighting for his life. She thought about all the children who had lost parents to violence during her deployments, and all the parents who had never come home. She had joined the medical profession partly to save lives instead of taking them, but also because she understood the ripple effects of violence in ways that most people couldn't comprehend. "Type and cross-match for 6 units," Dr. Wilson called out as the trauma team assembled. "Give me 2 large-bore IVs and call surgery. We're going to need or..." Sarah began cutting away the rest of Marcus's clothing, her hands working with the practiced efficiency of someone who had performed field medicine under enemy fire. As she worked, she found herself making a silent promise to Marcus and to his daughter Sophia. They had trusted her enough to hand over the gun. Now she was going to do everything in her power to make sure that trust was justified. What she discovered when she fully exposed the wounds, however, made her realize that Marcus's problems were far from over. The stab wounds formed a pattern that she recognized from her military experience. This wasn't random violence or mistaken identity. Someone had tried to execute Marcus, and they had done it with professional precision. The question was why, and whether whoever had tried to kill him would try again. The trauma room erupted into controlled chaos as Dr. Wilson and his team worked to stabilize Marcus. Sarah had seen battlefield medicine before, but civilian trauma care was different. More resources, better equipment, but also more protocols and less improvisation. She found herself automatically falling into the role she had played countless times in Afghanistan, anticipating needs and acting as the crucial link between the medical team and the patient. BP is dropping, 80/50 and falling, called out Jennifer, the trauma nurse who had rushed in from another floor. Heart rate 120 and climbing. Dr. Wilson's hands moved with practiced efficiency as he examined the wounds more closely. "These are deep, angled upward toward the liver." "Sarah, can you give me better light here?" As Sarah adjusted the overhead surgical lamp, she got her first clear look at the full extent of Marcus's injuries. What she saw confirmed her worst suspicions. The wounds weren't random stab marks from a street mugging gone wrong. They were precise, calculated, and positioned to cause maximum internal damage while avoiding immediate death. Someone had wanted Marcus to suffer before he died. "Dr. Wilson," Sarah said quietly, "I need to speak with you for a moment." "Dr." Wilson looked up from his examination, noting the serious tone in Sarah's voice. "Jennifer, continue the 4 fluids and prep for surgery." "Sarah, what is it?" Sarah stepped closer, lowering her voice so only Dr. Wilson could hear. "These wounds, they're not from a random attack. Look at the angle and depth. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing." Dr. Wilson examined the wounds again, this time with Sarah's observation in mind. As a trauma surgeon, he had seen every type of knife wound imaginable, but he had to admit that these looked different from typical assault injuries. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking Marcus might not be safe even here," Sarah replied. "If someone tried to kill him professionally, they might try to finish the job." Before Dr. Wilson could respond, Marcus's vital signs took a sharp turn for the worse. His blood pressure plummeted, and the heart monitor began showing dangerous arrhythmias. "He's crashing," Jennifer called out. "BP is 60/30, and his pulse is getting weaker." Dr. Wilson immediately shifted into crisis mode. "Give me 2 more units of O-negative and call the OR. Tell them we're coming up now. Sarah, I need you to help me get him stabilized for transport." As they worked frantically to keep Marcus alive, Sarah found herself thinking about his daughter Sophia. 6 years old, probably fast asleep, unaware that her father was fighting for his life just a few miles away. Sarah had seen too many children lose parents to violence, and she was determined not to let Sophia become another casualty of whatever had put Marcus in this situation. The elevator ride to the operating room was tense and silent except for the steady beeping of the portable monitors. Marcus drifted in and, out of consciousness, mumbling incoherently about his daughter and someone named Carlos who had set him up. Sarah filed away every word, knowing that these fragments might be crucial to understanding what had really happened. "Sophia needs her shoes for school," Marcus whispered during a moment of clarity. "Pink ones with the sparkles. She loves those shoes. We're going to make sure you can buy her new shoes, Marcus," Sarah replied, squeezing his hand gently. "Just stay with us, okay?" In the operating room, Dr. Wilson and the surgical team worked for 4 hours to repair the damage. The knife had punctured Marcus's liver and nicked his small intestine, causing significant internal bleeding. But as skilled as the surgical team was, Sarah knew that Marcus's recovery would depend on more than just medical intervention. If someone had tried to kill him once, they might try again. While Marcus was in surgery, Sarah made several phone calls. First, she called Mrs. Rodriguez, Marcus's neighbor, to check on Sophia. The elderly woman was frantic with worry. Marcus had never been gone this long without calling. "Is he okay?" Mrs. Rodriguez asked in heavily accented English. "Sophia keeps asking when her papa is coming home. I don't know what to tell her." "Tell her that her papa is sick, but the doctors are taking good care of him," Sarah replied. "And, Mrs. Rodriguez, this is important. Don't let anyone know where Sophia is. Don't answer the door for strangers. And if anyone comes asking about Marcus or Sophia, call the police immediately." Sarah's next call was to Detective Ray Morales, a contact she had made through her work at the hospital. Ray specialized in gang violence and had helped her before when patients had been brought in with suspicious injuries. "Sarah, what's got you calling at 4 in the morning?" Ray asked, though his voice was alert. Sarah suspected he hadn't been sleeping either. "I've got a patient who was stabbed tonight. Guy named Marcus Martinez. He came in with a gun, scared and bleeding, talking about mistaken identity, and someone named Carlos setting him up." "Ray, these aren't random wounds. Someone tried to execute him." Ray was quiet for a moment. "Marcus Martinez, that name sounds familiar. Let me run it through the system. What did he tell you about what happened?" Sarah relayed Marcus's story about being cornered in an alley by men who claimed he owed money to someone he'd never heard of. She also mentioned his references to Carlos, and being set up. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, Ray said. "And, Sarah, be careful. If this is what I think it might be, Marcus might not be the only one in danger." While waiting for Detective Morales, Sarah returned to check on Marcus's progress in surgery. Dr. Wilson emerged from the looking exhausted, but cautiously optimistic. "We got the bleeding stopped, and the liver repair looks good," he reported. "But he lost a lot of blood, and there's still a risk of infection. The next 24 hours will be critical." "Will he recover fully?" Sarah asked. "If there are no complications, yes. He's young and otherwise healthy." "But, Sarah, I have to ask, what's your interest in this case? I've never seen you this personally invested in a patient before." Sarah hesitated. How could she explain that Marcus reminded her of her own father, who had struggled to raise her alone? How could she describe the look in his eyes when he talked about his daughter, or the way he had trusted her enough to hand over the weapon? Instead, she simply said, "He's got a 6-year-old daughter who needs him." Dr. Wilson nodded, understanding more than Sarah's simple words conveyed. "Well, if anyone can help him get back to her, it's you. I've seen how you handle crisis situations, Sarah. Whatever your background was before nursing, it serves you well here." Detective Morales arrived as promised, looking like a man who had seen too much violence in his career. Ray was in his 40s, with graying hair and tired eyes, but Sarah knew he was one of the few cops who genuinely cared about stopping the cycle of violence that plagued their city. "I ran Marcus Martinez through our system," Ray said without preamble. "Clean record, not even a parking ticket. Works maintenance at the downtown library, been there for 3 years. Pays his taxes, pays his rent on time, volunteers at his daughter's school. Not exactly the profile of someone who would owe money to violent criminals." "So what's this about?" Sarah asked. "That's where it gets interesting. 6 months ago, we had another Marcus Martinez turn up dead in an alley about 10 blocks from here. Different guy, but same name, similar age, similar build. Gang execution, 2 precise stab wounds to the abdomen. Case is still unsolved." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Mistaken identity. That's what I'm thinking. Someone put out a hit on the wrong Marcus Martinez, realized their mistake, but decided to finish the job anyway to avoid loose ends. The implications of this revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. If Marcus had been targeted because of mistaken identity, then simply surviving the attack wouldn't make him safe. Professional killers didn't leave witnesses, especially witnesses who could identify them. "Ray, we need protection for Marcus and his daughter. If these people realize they got the wrong guy, they might go after Sophia to send a message." Detective Morales nodded grimly. "I was thinking the same thing. I can arrange for a patrol car to keep an eye on the house where the daughter is staying, and we can post a guard outside Marcus's room. But, Sarah, if this is a professional hit crew, hospital security might not be enough." Sarah thought about this for a moment, her military training automatically assessing the tactical situation. The hospital had good security, but it was designed to handle disruptive patients and grieving family members, not professional killers. If someone really wanted to get to Marcus, they would find a way. "What about witness protection?" she asked. "For that, I need Marcus to cooperate with an investigation, and I need evidence that he can identify the people who attacked him. Right now, all we have is speculation and a wounded man who might not remember much of what happened." As if summoned by their conversation, Dr. Wilson appeared in the hallway. "Marcus is awake," he announced. "He's asking for the nurse who helped him." "I assume that's you, Sarah." Sarah followed Dr. Wilson to the recovery room, where Marcus lay connected to various machines and for lines. His face was pale, but his eyes were alert, and he managed a weak smile when he saw her. "You saved my life," he whispered. "We're not done yet," Sarah replied, pulling a chair close to his bed. "Marcus, I need you to tell me everything you remember about tonight. Everything about who attacked you, what they said, what they looked like. Your life might depend on it." Marcus closed his eyes, the effort of remembering clearly painful. There were 3 of them, Hispanic guys, maybe in their 20s. The one who stabbed me had a tattoo on his neck. Looked like a snake or something. They kept saying I owed Carlos money, but I don't know no Carlos. What else did they say? Anything about why they thought you owed money. Something about a shipment that went missing. They kept asking where I hid it, what I did with it. I kept telling them they had the wrong guy, but they wouldn't listen. Detective Morales, who had been listening from the doorway, stepped into the room. Marcus, I'm Detective Morales. I think I know what happened to you, and I need your help to make sure it doesn't happen again. As Ray explained about the other Marcus Martinez who had been murdered, Sarah watched the color drain from Marcus's face. The realization that he had been targeted for someone else's crimes, that his daughter could become a target simply because of his name, was almost more than he could bear. What do I do? Marcus asked, his voice breaking. How do I protect Sophia? Sarah reached for his hand. We're going to figure this out together, Marcus. But first, you need to get stronger. And we need to make sure both you and Sophia are safe while we do. What none of them realized was that at that very moment, a man with a snake tattoo on his neck was asking questions of the library where Marcus worked, trying to find out where he lived and whether he had any family. The hunt for Marcus Martinez was far from over, and the stakes had just gotten much higher. The phone call that changed everything came at 6:23 a.m., just as Sarah was finishing her shift report. Detective Morales' voice was tense and urgent when he called her cell phone. Sarah, we have a problem. Someone broke into Marcus's apartment an hour ago. The neighbor who's been watching Sophia called 911 when she heard glass breaking next door. Sarah felt her blood run cold. Is Sophia okay? She's fine. The neighbor had her at her own apartment, and the intruders never found her. But, Sarah, they tore Marcus's place apart. This wasn't a random burglary. They were looking for something specific. I'm coming down there, Sarah said, already grabbing her jacket. Actually, I need you to stay at the hospital. If they couldn't find what they were looking for at his apartment, they might try to get to Marcus directly. And there's something else. The guy with the snake tattoo was seen at the library yesterday, asking Marcus's co-workers questions about his family. The implications hit Sarah immediately. Professional killers had rules, and one of those rules was to eliminate all loose ends. If they couldn't find whatever they thought Marcus had hidden, they would torture him for information. And if that didn't work, they would go after Sophia. Sarah made a decision that would have seemed impossible to her colleagues who knew her only as a compassionate nurse. Ray, I need you to do me a favor. Can you arrange for Sophia to be moved to a safe house? And I want Marcus moved to a secure room on the 4th floor, the one with no windows and only one entrance. Why the 4th floor? Because that's where I can best protect him. Detective Morales was quiet for a moment. Sarah, I'm going to ask you a question, and I need you to be straight with me. What exactly was your job before you became a nurse? Sarah hesitated. She had never told anyone at the hospital about her military background, partly because she wanted to leave that life behind, and partly because she didn't want to be treated differently. But now Marcus's life, and possibly Sophia's, depended on skills she had hoped never to use again. I was an Army Ranger, she said finally. 3 tours in Afghanistan, special operations. Jesus, Ray breathed, and here I was wondering why you were so calm during crisis situations. Okay, I'll arrange for Sophia to be moved, and I'll see about getting Marcus transferred to a more secure room. But, Sarah, if you're thinking what I think you're thinking, I need to remind you that this isn't Afghanistan. You can't just eliminate threats here. I'm not planning to eliminate anyone, Sarah replied. I'm planning to protect my patient until you can arrest the people who tried to kill him. After hanging up with Detective Morales, Sarah went to check on Marcus. She found him sitting up in bed, looking much stronger than he had just hours earlier. The surgery had been successful, and his body was responding well to treatment. But the haunted look in his eyes told her that he understood the gravity of his situation. The nurse told me someone broke into my apartment, he said as soon as he saw her. Sophia's stuff. Did they hurt her things? Sarah sat down beside his bed. Sophia is safe. Marcus. Detective Morales has arranged for her to stay somewhere secure until this is all over. And your apartment can be repaired. The important thing is that both of you are alive. But for how long? Marcus asked, voicing the fear that Sarah knew was consuming him. These people, they're not going to just give up, are they? They're going to keep coming until they find whatever they think I have, or until they kill me and Sophia both. Sarah studied Marcus's face carefully. Marcus, I need you to think really hard. Is there any possibility that you know something or have something that these people want? Maybe something that seems innocent to you, but might be valuable to criminals? Marcus shook his head slowly. I work maintenance at the library. I fix toilets and change light bulbs. What could I possibly know that would be worth killing for? But as he spoke, something flickered across his face, a memory or a thought that he wasn't quite ready to voice. What is it? Sarah asked gently. It's probably nothing, Marcus said, but his voice carried uncertainty. About 2 months ago, I found something while I was cleaning the old storage area in the library's basement. There are these rooms down there that haven't been used in years, and I was clearing them out for renovation. What did you find? A box, hidden behind some old filing cabinets. It looked like it had been there for years, covered in dust. I almost threw it away, but something made me curious, so I opened it. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. What was in the box? Papers, mostly. Financial records, it looked like. Numbers and dates and names. Some of the names I recognized from the newspaper, politicians, businessmen. I didn't understand most of it, but some of the dollar amounts were huge. Millions of dollars. What did you do with the box? Marcus looked embarrassed. I took it home. I know I shouldn't have, but I thought maybe it was historical documents or something. The library has archives going back over 100 years. I was going to ask my supervisor about it, but I forgot. Sarah's military training kicked in as she processed this information. Financial records with names of prominent people and large dollar amounts hidden in an obscure location, valuable enough to kill for. This sounded like evidence of money laundering or corruption. If Marcus had unknowingly stumbled across records that could destroy powerful people, it would explain everything. Marcus, where's the box now? At my apartment. I put it in Sophia's closet, behind her winter clothes. I figured nobody would look there. Sarah realized with growing alarm that the intruders might not have found what they were looking for simply because they hadn't thought to search a 6-year-old's bedroom thoroughly. But they would be back, and next time they would be more systematic. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. We know you have our property. Return it, or the girl pays the price. Sarah showed the message to Marcus, whose face went white. How did they get your number? It doesn't matter how, Sarah said, her voice taking on the hard edge of command authority that her military subordinates would have recognized immediately. What matters is that they just made this personal. She stood up and began pacing the small room, her mind automatically shifting into tactical planning mode. The enemy had revealed their position by making threats, which meant they were feeling pressured. That was good. Pressured enemies made mistakes. But they had also escalated from targeting Marcus to threatening Sophia, which meant the situation was becoming exponentially more dangerous. Marcus, I need you to listen carefully, Sarah said. I'm going to arrange for you to be moved to a different room, one that's easier to secure. And I'm going to stay with you until this is resolved. You don't understand? Marcus protested. These aren't just street thugs. The guy who questioned my coworkers at the library, he knew things about me that he shouldn't have known. He knew Sophia's name, knew where she goes to school, knew about Mrs. Rodriguez. These people have resources. I understand better than you think, Sarah replied. And here's what they don't understand. So do I. At that moment, Dr. Wilson appeared in the doorway, looking concerned. Sarah, you're supposed to be off shift. You've been here for 12 hours. I'm staying, Sarah said simply. Dr. Wilson started to object, but something in Sarah's tone made him reconsider. This is about the patient security issue Detective Morales mentioned, isn't it? Yes. Dr. Wilson studied Sarah's face for a moment, noting the transformation from compassionate nurse to something much harder and more focused. What do you need from me? I need Marcus moved to room 4B, the isolation room. I need the hallway cameras monitored continuously, and I need to know immediately if anyone asks questions about Marcus or tries to access his medical records. Consider it done, Dr. Wilson said. And Sarah, whatever your background was before you came here, I'm glad you're on our side. 2 hours later, Marcus was settled in the secure room on the fourth floor. Sarah had used the time to prepare, drawing on skills she hadn't needed since leaving the military. She had studied the hospital's floor plans, identified all possible entry and exit points, and established communication protocols with hospital security and Detective Morales. She had also made another phone call, one that she hoped she would never have to make. Her former commanding officer, Colonel James Patterson, now worked private security for high-profile clients. If anyone could provide the kind of protection that Sophia needed, it was him. Ranger Martinez, Colonel Patterson had said when he answered her call, using her old military designation. "I was wondering when I'd hear from you again. I need a favor, Colonel. A big one. What's the situation?" Sarah explained about Marcus and Sophia, about the financial records, and the threats. Colonel Patterson listened without interruption, and when she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "You're sure about the quality of the threat? Professional killers, probably organized crime connected. They've already demonstrated willingness to kill innocent people. And you're planning to provide close protection yourself?" "Yes, sir." Another pause. "I can have a team in Chicago in 4 hours. But, Martinez, I have to ask, are you sure you want to get back into this kind of work?" Sarah looked through the window of Marcus's room, where he was sleeping fitfully despite the pain medication. She thought about Sophia, 6 years old, and probably scared and confused about why she couldn't go home. She thought about all the children she had seen during her deployments whose lives had been destroyed by violence. "I'm already in it, Colonel. I just need to make sure I win." "Understood. My team will coordinate with local law enforcement." "And Martinez? Watch your six. If these people are as professional as you think they are, they won't come at you head-on." As evening approached, Sarah settled into the chair beside Marcus's bed, her senses heightened and her military training fully engaged. She had no illusions about what she was facing. Professional killers would not be deterred by hospital security or police patrols. They would come for Marcus, and when they did, she would be ready. What she didn't know was that at that very moment, 3 men were studying the hospital security systems from a van parked across the street. The man with the snake tattoo smiled as he watched the shift change through binoculars. Hospital security was predictable, following the same patterns every day. Breaking in would be easy. What they didn't know was that the tired-looking nurse in scrubs sitting beside Marcus's bed was a decorated Army Ranger who had survived 3 tours in one of the world's most dangerous war zones. They were about to learn the difference between hunting an innocent civilian and hunting someone who could hunt them back. The attack came at 2:17 a.m. during the quietest part of the night shift. Sarah had been expecting it, but the precision of the assault still impressed her from a tactical standpoint. These weren't amateurs. She had noticed the first sign of trouble 20 minutes earlier when the security camera feed from the parking garage went dark for exactly 30 seconds before coming back online. To most people, it would have looked like a minor technical glitch. To someone with Sarah's training, it was a clear sign that professionals were testing the hospital's response protocols. The second sign came when the elevator to the 4th floor stopped functioning, forcing anyone who wanted to reach Marcus's room to use the stairwells. Again, it could have been explained as routine maintenance, but Sarah knew better. The intruders were channeling potential responders into predictable routes while maintaining their own escape options. Sarah had turned off the lights in Marcus's room and positioned herself where she could observe the hallway through a crack in the door. Marcus was awake too, the pain medication having worn off enough for him to sense the tension in the air. "They're coming, aren't they?" he whispered. "Yes," Sarah replied, her voice calm and steady. "But, Marcus, I need you to trust me completely. Whatever happens, whatever you see or hear, stay exactly where you are unless I tell you otherwise. Can you do that?" Marcus nodded, understanding that his life depended on following her instructions precisely. The third sign came when the night nurse, who usually patrolled this floor, failed to make her scheduled rounds. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Detective Morales. Hospital security found Nurse Johnson unconscious in a supply closet. She's alive but was drugged. ETA for backup is 8 minutes. 8 minutes was an eternity in a close-quarters combat situation. Sarah knew that whoever was coming for Marcus would be in and out long before help arrived. She would have to handle this alone, using skills she had hoped never to need again. She heard them before she saw them, the almost silent whisper of rubber-soled shoes moving carefully down the hallway. 3 sets of footsteps, moving in formation, stopping periodically to check room numbers. Professional discipline, good spacing, coordinated movement. These were not common street criminals. Through the crack in the door, Sarah caught her first glimpse of the assault team. 3 men, all wearing dark clothing and surgical masks. They moved with the fluid efficiency of people who had done this many times before. The lead man carried what looked like a suppressed pistol, while his companions had knives, weapons that could kill silently without alerting the entire hospital. Sarah recognized the tattoo on the neck of the second man, a snake, exactly as Marcus had described. This was the same person who had tried to kill Marcus in the alley and who had been asking questions about his family. Now he was here to finish the job. The team stopped outside Marcus's room, and Sarah heard one of them whisper in Spanish, "Remember, we need him alive long enough to tell us where the documents are. After that, make it look like he died from surgical complications." Sarah felt a familiar calm settle over her, the same focused clarity that had kept her alive during countless firefights in Afghanistan. Time seemed to slow down as her training took over. She had 2 primary objectives: protect Marcus and neutralize the immediate threat. Secondary objectives included minimizing collateral damage to hospital staff and patients, and, if possible, capturing at least one attacker alive for interrogation. The tactical situation was challenging, but not impossible. The attackers had the advantage of numbers, but Sarah had the advantages of position, surprise, and superior training. They were expecting to find a helpless patient, not a decorated Army Ranger prepared for close-quarters combat. The door handle turned slowly, and the first attacker began to enter the room. Sarah waited until he was completely inside and committed to his entry before she moved. Her first strike was precise and devastating. She grabbed the lead attacker's gun hand and twisted it violently upward while driving her knee into his solar plexus. The suppressed weapon fired harmlessly into the ceiling as he doubled over, gasping for breath. Sarah followed up with an elbow strike to the base of his skull, and he dropped unconscious to the floor. The second attacker, the man with the snake tattoo, reacted quickly, lunging toward Marcus's bed with his knife raised. But Sarah was already moving, interceding herself between the blade and her patient. She caught the attacker's wrist and used his own momentum to throw him against the wall, where he hit hard enough to crack the drywall. The third attacker had more time to react and was advancing more cautiously, his knife held in a professional fighting grip. Sarah could see in his eyes the moment when he realized that she wasn't just a nurse who had gotten lucky. This was someone who knew how to fight. "Who the hell are you?" he asked in accented English. "Someone who's going to give you one chance to walk away," Sarah replied, positioning herself between him and Marcus. The attacker smiled coldly. "Lady, you have no idea who you're messing with. Carlos Mendoza doesn't forgive, and he doesn't forget. You can die here tonight, or you could die later. But you're going to die." Sarah felt a chill at the mention of Carlos Mendoza. She knew that name from intelligence briefings during her military service. Mendoza was connected to a major drug trafficking organization with ties to several terrorist groups. If Marcus had stumbled across financial records related to Mendoza's operations, then this situation was even more dangerous than she had realized. "The only person who's going to die tonight," Sarah said, "is anyone who tries to hurt my patient." The third attacker moved with professional skill, his knife work indicating formal training. But Sarah had trained with the best special forces instructors in the world, and she had survived combat situations that would have broken most people. More importantly, she was fighting to protect an innocent man and his 6-year-old daughter, while her opponent was fighting for money. The knife fight lasted less than 30 seconds. Sarah used a combination of disarmament techniques and hand-to-hand combat moves that she had learned during Ranger training, modified by hard-won experience in real combat situations. When it was over, the third attacker was unconscious on the floor, his knife secured, and his hands zip-tied with medical tape. The second attacker, the man with the snake tattoo, was beginning to regain consciousness, and Sarah quickly secured him as well. As she worked, she could hear sirens approaching the hospital. Detective Morales and his backup had arrived. "Are you okay?" Sarah asked Marcus, who was staring at her with a mixture of awe and disbelief. How did you? Who are you really?" he stammered. "I'm your nurse," Sarah replied simply. "Everything else is just job experience." Dr. Wilson was the first medical staff member to reach the room, followed closely by Detective Morales and a team of police officers. Dr. Wilson took one look at the three unconscious attackers and the completely unharmed patient and nurse and shook his head in amazement. "Sarah, remind me never to get on your bad side," he said. Detective Morales was more practical in his assessment. 3 professional killers, all neutralized without a single gunshot fired. "Sarah, the FBI is going to want to talk to you about this." Over the next several hours, as crime scene investigators processed the room and paramedics checked on the defeated attackers, the full scope of the conspiracy began to emerge. The box that Marcus had found contained detailed financial records of a money laundering operation run by Carlos Mendoza's organization. The records showed payments to corrupt politicians, judges, and police officials, along with documentation of drug shipment schedules and distribution networks. The other, Marcus Martinez, the one who had been murdered 6 months earlier, had been a low-level accountant who had discovered discrepancies in the organization's books. He had been killed before he could expose the operation, but not before he had hidden backup copies of the evidence in what he thought was a secure location. The problem, Detective Morales explained to Sarah and Marcus, is that the dead Marcus Martinez had told his girlfriend about hiding important papers at work before he was killed. When she was questioned after his murder, she mentioned the library, but she didn't know he meant the old public library downtown, not the university library where she thought he worked. "So they've been looking for the papers for 6 months, Sarah said, understanding the full picture now. "Exactly. And when they finally figured out the right location, they found that a maintenance worker named Marcus Martinez had access to the basement storage areas. They assumed it was the same person. The box of evidence, when finally retrieved from Sophia's closet by a police team, proved to be devastating to the Mendoza organization. The financial records provided enough evidence to indict dozens of people, including several high-ranking city officials and a federal judge. But for Sarah, the most important outcome was much simpler. Marcus recovered fully from his injuries and was reunited with Sophia within a week. The threat to their lives ended when Carlos Mendoza and his top lieutenants were arrested in a coordinated raid based on the evidence Marcus had unknowingly preserved. 3 months later, Sarah received a handwritten letter from Sophia Martinez. It was written in a 6-year-old's careful print on construction paper, with a drawing of a nurse with angel wings. "Dear Nurse Sarah," it read, "thank you for saving my daddy. He told me you were the bravest person in the whole world. I made you a picture because heroes should have pictures. Love, Sophia. P.S. Daddy bought me new sparkly shoes like you promised." Dr. Wilson found Sarah reading the letter in the break room, tears streaming down her face. "You know," he said gently, "I've been thinking about what happened that night. You could have called security and waited for backup. You could have evacuated Marcus to a safer location. You had a lot of options." "Yes," Sarah agreed. "But you chose to stand and fight. Why?" Sarah thought about the question for a moment, considering all the factors that had led to her decision. Her military training, her protective instincts, her commitment to her patients. But in the end, the answer was simpler than any of that. Because, she said, Sophia needed her daddy to come home. Dr. Wilson nodded slowly. "I'm glad you're on our team, Sarah. I have a feeling that you're going to save a lot more lives before you're done." Sarah folded Sophia's letter carefully and put it in her locker next to her nursing license and a small American flag that she had carried through 3 deployments. Different tools for different battles, but the mission remained the same: protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Outside the break room window, she could see the city skyline of Chicago, a place where millions of people went about their daily lives, mostly unaware of the thin line between safety and chaos. Sarah knew that there would always be people like Carlos Mendoza, predators who viewed innocent civilians as acceptable casualties in their pursuit of power and money. But there would also always be people willing to stand against them. People like Detective Morales, who had spent his career fighting corruption. People like Dr. Wilson, who dedicated their lives to healing others. And people like Marcus Martinez, an ordinary man who had chosen to do the right thing, even when it put his life at risk. Sarah returned to her rounds, checking on patients and administering medications, just another nurse in scrubs making her way through a busy hospital. But she carried with her the knowledge that when evil showed its face, there were still people willing to look it in the eye and say, "Not here, not today, not on my watch." The armed gunman who had stumbled into the emergency room that night had been looking for help. What he found was something much more valuable. A guardian angel in scrubs who proved that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one who looks the most harmless. And somewhere across the city, a 6-year-old girl named Sophia Martinez slept peacefully in her own bed, safe in the knowledge that her daddy would always come home, protected by a nurse who understood that some promises are worth fighting for.